All Things DER podcast, brought to you by AEIC. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Cook. In this podcast, I dig in, define, and discuss where the new energy economy is heading with electric industry leaders and explore all the ways that distributed energy resources can modernize and improve our ever-evolving power grid. Thank you for joining us. In today's episode, I'm talking with Bobby Hawthorne, the Distribution Engineering Service Manager at Alabama Power. We discussed the impact the first residential home microgrid project has had on the future of DER and how we can continually utilize these research and development projects to better understand the future of the power grid. From discovering increased reliability factors and uncovering unique ways to observe load management practices, we cover a wide array of topics that have the potential to positively impact and move us forward to an ever-increasing reliable power grid of the future.
So welcome, Bobby.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's nice to be with you this morning.
So the first thing that comes to my mind is I know and I'm aware that you have a microgrid at Alabama Power. And I just thought we could jump in and you can tell me a little bit about this microgrid, how it was conceptualized, what was the objective, and really where it is today.
Sure, be glad to. Really, the idea of the project began back in around 2016, and really the objective of the project was to design and build a first of its kind living laboratories, we think of it, to prepare Alabama Power for future grid needs and future customer load profiles and expectations as they move forward into the future. The neighborhood itself is a planned neighborhood of 62 homes. The homes were built with the latest energy efficient construction practices and many connected smart home devices in the homes. What's unique about this project is it was the first project in the US that integrated a microgrid with residential customers that loads could be monitored and controlled by us, the utility. There were also several electric vehicles within the neighborhood, which was an added benefit. There was a 3-year agreement with the homeowners to allow us to perform this research during this period. The project was designed and construction began in 2017. The microgrid itself was completed in 2018, and all of the homes were built in 2017 and finished up in 2018. The microgrid itself has got 330 kW solar array, about 600 kilowatt hour storage, a load bank that is used primarily for testing. And it also has a 400 kW natural gas generator as a backup. Of course, the microgrid can island the 62 homes, or it can export power into the grid when we're not in the island mode.
So I think for our listeners, give a little perspective of Alabama Power in regards to, what are the assets that you own and operate, and what are the different types of companies that you have to kind of integrate those assets with on a daily basis. Because one thing about this podcast, we're visiting state of PA, a lot of us are not lines only company, not allowed to own generation. So our specific use cases are kind of different from, say, in Arizona, where there's a vertically integrated company that they can kind of own. So just like from your perspective of where you sit and how you serve your customers from a transmission, distribution, or generation point of view.
Sure. At Alabama Power and Southern Company, we are vertically integrated. So we have generation, transmission, and distribution assets. And it really, when it comes to DER, it makes our use case and really a little bit different from others. It certainly impacts our generation side of the house. And as we discuss DER more and more, it's provided the opportunity for us, like in distribution, to interact much more with those on the generation side of the house, which we really traditionally never have done in the past. And it's just been a whole new learning experience for a lot of us, understanding how they plan and prepare for DER in this case, and also educating them on how we design and operate the distribution system and how DER will impact us. So it's been a very interesting process as we've gone through and had those discussions.
I think, from the outside looking into the utility world, a lot of people just lump the power grid into one whole expertise knowledge base. But like you just said, you have, even in the same companies, you have generation expertise, you have transmission expertise, and you have distribution expertise. And I remember, 15 years ago, transmission and distribution rarely talked to each other, let alone the bulk generation talking to the impacts of a distribution asset at the very edge of the grid. So it is a dynamic learning environment, not only for those outside the industry, but even internal stakeholders to kind of understand each part's contribution to the overall delivery of grid. So I'm just kind of expanding upon, why it's so important for us from all our different perspectives to really share this knowledge so that we can understand it holistically. Because one analogy I've been sharing is, the power grid is a mosaic. And, we really need to limit ourselves of like drilling into those individual like pieces of that, of a tile. So what I think your microgrid did, and this was 6 years ago, it sounds like, you guys really pulled up and said, what are all of the devices and assets that could play a part of this future grid of tomorrow, and how can we interact and really bring it and be less of a hindrance to our customers that want this, and really kind of play and quarterback that overall solution. So from your perspective, what are some of the benefits that you or the customers have seen from this microgrid application you guys installed in a neighborhood?
Well, definitely, if you install a microgrid, you hope there's some benefits to the company or the customers. And that's been the case here. For the customers, it's really reliability. With the microgrid, we've had several times when we were successful in a transparent islanding situation. The customers never even were aware that the grid had gone out, that there had been some occurrence, some outage on the system, and the microgrid just transferred over to the island mode, and they continued on, never even realizing there was an issue.
Increased reliability sounds, and
that's right. But and that's probably the obvious use case for the customers, but for Alabama Power, it's been more about understanding the challenges of building and operating a microgrid. It's certainly not trivial, because our projects is a little unique. Included in a microgrid, we also have the ability to monitor and control some of the customer's load during this 3-year period. And it allowed us to understand how load management can affect the load on the system, forming peak shaving, how storage can factor into that use case, and also understanding customers' habits regarding these new smart loads that they can manage. Also, the electric vehicles, that's been a big opportunity there to understand customers' habits and charging their vehicles and how that impacts the grid itself. The other thing is just future design, how we'll design the distribution system in the future with these new DERs and electric vehicles, how it impacts transformer loading and other issues on the system. So overall, it's been a great learning opportunity for us.
Definitely sounds like, and I think, the fact that you guys kicked this off in 2016, you're well ahead of the curve in understanding these dynamics. I know that this microgrid is available on YouTube, I think. It's quite a cool video kind of explaining, the process and the ultimate end game. And you've, it seems, have probably taken this knowledge and worked it throughout kind of where you're headed, especially as we electrify our transportation and giving our customers this new ability to be active. So now that you have this awareness of what it takes. So you kind of mentioned a little bit, well, what would have been some of your overall challenges when kickstarting the overall microgrid initiative for those engineers out there trying to do their first microgrid on their grid?
Well, sure. As probably all of us know, a microgrid is not an off-the-shelf product you just plug and play. It's definitely an R&D project, a science project, as I like to say. As we've gone through the years operating the microgrid, we've had some little hiccups and bumps. We've had several unplanned outages. Sometimes it's something related to maybe the microgrid controller or the storage system. Other times it's been totally separate from the microgrid itself, but it still resulted in the customers losing power. We had one situation where we had a failed underground cable. This is, of course, is an underground system. So the customers expect or assume they'll never have outages. They're on a microgrid, right? But we had a failed cable in the subdivision, had somebody dig into it. And of course, that resulted in the customers losing power. So just another learning opportunity for the customers. There's still the potential to have an outage, even if you're on a microgrid and fed underground. So, that's just one opportunity. Another is the grounding. I think a lot of us understand and appreciate the significance of a well-grounded system. And on a microgrid, it's even more so. Having the experience and challenges of ensuring you have a strong ground on the system is critical to having a stable microgrid. So just a couple of things that we've run into and continue to learn every day as we operate.
So it's definitely not a one and done kind of application. As these microgrids become more, I would say microgrid, the word kind of been a buzz for about 20 years. And I'll just, being a history buff that I am for our listeners, where we came from was the idea of there were a few large customers that wanted to use electricity to light up the railroad yards or use electricity to power the machines that were being developed during the Second Industrial Revolution. And then as we found and became more capable as an industry to remove the electron creation flow, so generation, out to the rural areas and ship it in, we went from microgrids in itself for specific customers and specific plants until we electrified the masses. So we went from a microgrid to a very large machine, the largest machine in the world. And now there's a lot of discussion that is the grid reliable? I think that is a very high level term, wouldn't you agree? Because it comes down to each neighborhood, each customer, each application, and every use case is very unique and different. I just kind of remembering to the listeners that, we come from microgrids and now we're kind of breaking the grid down, and really we need to understand the impacts all the way from protection settings to grounding control to the control from a operations perspective, and ensuring that generation is available and ready 24/7 to ensure that increased reliability and resiliency. So I think your microgrid is fascinating, and I'm glad that we get to share, this application with others. Is there anything that you would like to share in regards to microgrids or DER in general?
Well, first, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to talk with you this morning, Elizabeth. The microgrid project's been a very interesting project, and it just is an ongoing project. It's kind of like a lot of things. You never really complete with it. We're currently installing a new microgrid controller on the microgrid. This controller will allow us to integrate it with our ADMS system and just further provide us the opportunity to learn how DER and DERMS in general will interact with the distribution system. So we continue to learn and look forward to more opportunities as we continue to operate the microgrid.
And for those listeners, in regards to all of our acronyms, I'll be sure in the show notes, there's a ton of terminology that we share here in the industry, and a lot of things that you may have heard was the ADMS, DERMS, load management. I think another great perspective we should continue to educate and share in this industry is those terms are very verbose, I think, in regards to what they mean to each individual utility, state, regulator, customer, and we really need to understand where we're talking and when and how and who has what technology before really saying yes or no to these ideas. So in the show notes, I'll kind of describe those for you. Well, Bobby, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to continuing to learn with you in this industry that is, I think, so vibrant and great, because one thing about the electric utility is that we can share, and we can share our lessons learned and our understandings and really kind of build from each other as we move into this future that really has yet to be defined for all of us.
All right. Thank you, Elizabeth.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of All Things DER. Thanks for tuning in. I hope today's conversation got you thinking about new and creative ways to improve our power grid. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to hear new episodes. This podcast is brought to you by AEIC, the place where operations leaders come together to share knowledge and provide guidance to the electric utility industry. We'll be back with a new episode next week. Until then, keep powering on.